Hello and welcome to Celebrating Simple Life. I'm Kimberly and I've been planning parties and incredible events for the past 15 years. I'm passionate about connecting people, making gatherings purposeful, and making the most out of every moment. Join me as we learn together how to find joy, celebrate the simple things in life, use events to grow your business, entertain with purpose, and have a whole lot of fun along the way. Cheers to Celebrating Simple Life. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to give a shout out to the Block Farmhouse on Instagram. Thank you so much for sharing a screenshot of your listening to the episode with Bark Design Studio. It means the world to me and it really helps the podcast grow when you take the time to engage. So thank you so much, the Block Farmhouse. I appreciate it so much. Please email Kimberly at celebratingsimplelife.com to get your free gift sent out. Today on Celebrating Simple Life, the podcast, I'm chatting with Ashlyn George, founder of the Lost Girl's Guide to Finding the World. From scaling mountains over 6,000 meters and encountering avalanches and erupting volcanoes along the way, to flying in a military jet with Canadian Forces snowbirds for fun, Ashlyn's taste for unique adventures has carried her around the world to 60 countries and all 7 continents, with a suitcase full of stories to share. Ashlyn is the go-to expert and writer on outdoor adventure activities in Saskatchewan. Her blog is filled with captivating stories, travel tips, advice, and adventures from Canada to around the world. An enthusiastic and passionate self-starter, Ashlyn is always looking for her next challenge. Back in 2015, Ashlyn was the official travel blogger and online personality for the province of Saskatchewan through the program they have for being the Sask Wanderer. Her energy and joy for life shines through her creative talents in documenting unique stories, filming, writing, photography, and social media. Tune in today to hear our conversation, find out her secrets for how she travels the world, and teams up with amazing companies on collaborations. You will not want to miss this. Hello, Ashlyn. How are you?
I'm so good.
I'm so glad to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
And it's sunny and it's a great day and we've both had a lot on the go we were talking about. So this is nice to just sit down and chill out and have a nice fun conversation.
Yes.
Awesome. So I just love your story. And for listeners who have not yet had a chance to know all about Ashlyn and everything that you're doing, I would love to just kind of start from the beginning so that we can hear more about you and then talk sort of more about projects moving forward from there. So tell me, there's more of a story than even the beginning of the Lost Girl's Guide. So let's just start from the beginning about you.
Yeah, so I grew up here in Saskatchewan. I'm a small town farm girl. Grew up in a grain farm. 3 older brothers. Kind of was always that if I couldn't do it as good as my brothers, it's because I was doing it better than them.
I love that.
Very competitive and always very goal oriented and wanted to try and do everything. Even throughout like elementary and high school, I did everything from like the student representative council and drama to dance to track and field and basketball, volleyball, everything I could get my hands on. I just wanted to like engage in as many experiences as I could. And that's something that hasn't left me as an adult.
Clearly, yes. I love that because I think it's easy sometimes. And sometimes I feel like it's maybe the support system that you have around you too, where you're like encouraged to try different things. But it's hard sometimes. Small town. I grew up in a small town too. There wasn't as many opportunities for different and unique style. Obviously, time has passed and there are different things in small towns now than there maybe were as growing up. But I love that you just jumped on everything that was there.
Yep. And that was the nice thing is because you didn't always have enough girls to make a full team.
Totally.
But so if there were multiple activities happening at the same time, they would change the schedule so you could go from one to the other to encourage you to be on the team and participate too. So I think that was something I was really fortunate to be able to have access to. Whereas in a big city, when there's a ton of different activities, there's enough people to fill those spots.
That's right. And you just either do it or don't do it. And
totally.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love that. So you grew up here and so did you move into Saskatoon at a certain point or what brought you here?
Yeah, so I guess I was 17, finished high school, moved to Saskatoon, kind of was following that typical life path where, you finish high school, go to university, to eventually get a job. And so I moved to Saskatoon, and I started out, I originally wanted to be a doctor, actually. So I started out doing all the sciences for that. And again, with like my personality of everything, I was in my third year of university and had literally split my time 50-50 between should I get an English degree or should I get like a biology degree? And I couldn't decide. And then I actually ended up jumping over to education. And technically, I'm a high school teacher, although I've never officially stepped into like a high school in a teaching role. Right. I've taught in different ways now.
Yeah.
But yeah, things changed after I got my degree. So
well, and that is the part of the story that I love, because I think sometimes that it can be really easy to feel a sense of, well, this is what my plan was, and I was moving in this direction, and I either don't want to let myself down thinking that I'm quitting doing something that I said I was going to do, or even the people around you who have heard you say what you're going to do, that it's easy to sometimes just stay in it even if your heart's not in it. And exactly. I admire that you were able to just move forward and decide this wasn't quite right for me, even though that takes a lot of courage.
Yep. And especially when there's that societal pressure, right? Mm-hmm. Like, okay, you've spent your time in university, now you should get that job and kind of settle down with life. And it actually, for me, what happened was I had a job interview with the Saskatoon public school system fall into my lap. It was connected through a teacher and a professor that I knew, and she's like, just go to this interview, don't dress up, like wear yoga pants and a ponytail. It was kind of like an outdoors type teaching role. And I went to the interview, and as I walked out, all what I could think of was like, oh, please don't give me that job. Which is, you're never supposed to actually think of that, right? Yeah. And so the reason I kind of felt that way is not that I wouldn't love it. Like I could be a great teacher if that is what I chose to do today. But at the time, I just didn't feel ready to settle down, and I just thought there was something more out there. And I had this idea of travel in my head, and I was at that time thinking about doing a 6-month trip abroad. My bucket list has been very important to me. It's very goal setting for me. And at the time, I wanted to chase the sun for a year. So like a summer in Canada and then a summer somewhere else. And so if this job had worked out, I probably would have said yes to it, because you feel that pressure.
Absolutely. And then once you're in it, I feel like coming out of high school and then university and different periods of your life, there's sort of natural transition times that happen. And those don't happen as often or as clearly as you get older and life just kind of moves on. There isn't those periods where you have the opportunity to say, hey, this is what I feel like doing now, versus, oh, I'm already in a career. This feels like I probably shouldn't quit my job just to go chase the sun, right?
Yes, right? And then you'll get pushback from people too, who are like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And it makes it even harder.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you picked the right time to chase the sun.
Yes.
Okay, so how did that come about? So did you get offered the job?
I didn't. No, I didn't get the job.
So your wish came true.
Yes.
And then where did you go from there?
So I was trying to think back how like travel actually started for me, because even in university, I had a girlfriend who was thinking about doing a year abroad in Australia. And at the time I was like, what? No, like, why would you ever want to travel somewhere else? Like, I was just getting comfortable with being in Saskatoon. And I think it was a girl that I worked with who had spent some time in Australia. And I was like, I think I could do that. That wouldn't be very hard. Their culture is similar.
Yep.
They speak English. I look Australian until you hear my Canadian accent, right? Like, you fit in. And
I'm going to tell you a little aside here. I was in Australia 2 years ago, and I got pulled aside by obviously I am not Australian, same as you, where I have not an Australian accent, even though I wish that I could make one happen for myself. I got pulled aside by a tour bus from China, and they got a lot of pictures taken with me.
A lot, right?
And I wasn't speaking, so they obviously didn't know that I was. And because I've lived in China myself, I was very warm and receptive to the idea, because that happened to me all the time many, many moons ago. So it's sort of like a little throwback to my youth.
It's too funny. Yeah. Impromptu photo shoot.
Yeah, totally. And everyone on my team of like the group of us that were traveling together was like, what's happening? I'm like, yeah, just another day. Just another day. Anyways, totally derailed that conversation, but that was that.
I love that.
So did you end up going to Australia?
I did 6 months in Australia, New Zealand, and Fiji. And
lovely.
My life changed when I was on that trip. I feel like that's very cliche to say that. But up until that point, I had been doing all these things, all these activities. Even in university, I was very involved. And when I started traveling, I actually realized what I was really passionate about. And I hadn't had that opportunity while I had been on the path I had been on when I was in Saskatchewan. And for me, it was discovering a love of the outdoors and adventure activities. I had this week in New Zealand where I did a skydive, bungee jump, jet boat ride, and helicopter ride in one day. And then the next day there was whitewater rafting, black water rafting, caving, abseiling. I went zorbing in the big plastic bouncy ball. I hiked my very first ever 21-kilometer trail in the mountains. You know, like I'd never done that before. And this was all in the course of literally 6 days because I just said yes to everything just to figure out if I liked it or not.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, and there's something about, and having traveled quite extensively myself, I felt the same as you. It wasn't ever in my, and I don't know if this was just the way you're brought up or just, because this is a great place to live. This is a great place to be. But I think that there's nothing like being Australia and New Zealand differently. There isn't this sense of sort of uncomfortableness because you can fit sort of right in there. But when you're living in a place where you look different and your customs are different and the food is different and it smells different and it's all different, there isn't many circumstances that you can kind of find yourself in naturally day to day when you're just living in your comfortable life that can put you into that level of, I don't want to say distress because it's not even a bad thing. It can feel uncomfortable sometimes at times, but it's like there's this new part of your brain that opens up that just gives you this new perspective that I believe is sort of impossible to find in any other way besides traveling and putting yourself into these like cultures and circumstances that just can't really be recreated easily at home.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And coming home, I've had so much perspective too on home and what is amazing about here and being a tourist in my own backyard because I do a lot of travel and adventure around Saskatchewan. And I argue you can do as many amazing things here in a province as you can in countries around the world too. But there's something very unique about going out and traveling solo and being independent and knowing that you're 15,000 kilometers away from your support system. And if things are going a little sideways, you need to figure out how to make it work. And there's a freedom to it and a challenge and a confidence that grows because of those experiences.
Oh, yeah. I love that. So continuing on then, so you had these wild adventures in New Zealand, Australia, Fiji, and then your time is like coming to an end where you sort of thought you had a time frame when you were leaving, and then what?
So then I created a little life philosophy for myself. So I met people traveling who introduced me to other places of the world that I had never even heard of. Angkor Wat is always one that comes to mind. I met a British guy in Western Australia who was talking about Angkor Wat in Cambodia. And I had no idea what he was talking about. I had never heard of it. And I had to go Google it afterwards. And I discovered it's this incredible temple complex that is the equivalent of Machu Picchu. But I think fewer Canadians have heard of it just because of geography, right? And that was kind of my inspiration to say, you know what, if I spent 5 years learning in an institution in university, I have my degrees, nobody can ever take them away from me, I should be able to spend 5 years of my life traveling and exploring the world and learning in that capacity. Because as an educator, I believe in both ways of learning.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, I do too. As a parent, now that comes back all the time to me because I know what education and what traveling education, I guess traditional education that we would see it as versus traveling and experiences are for life. And that has been, my kids are both on their third passports at their little age because that for me is such a big deal. And I have never ever in the years, I mean, they're still in elementary school versus as you get older, that presents a few more challenges of just wanting to make sure you're not missing school if you are staying in a traditional school sense as well as traveling. But never once have I had any kickback from anybody. The only thing that they've ever said is go, right. See the world. And that makes me respect, the education system so much more, having people like that are saying that to me, that are traditional educators, that see the value in those experiences, because I don't think there's anything that you can do in a classroom that has quite that type of feel. And they both have their validity, absolutely. 100%. Like you need to learn some book smarts also in order to be street smart, but
you do.
Right? I love that. So as you're traveling then and you decide that you're going to travel, so this is going to be the question that I'm going to keep getting asked from my listeners after hearing this conversation is, but how? Sure, Ashlyn, this sounds great. You're just going to decide to go chase the sun, and you must have really hit your summer jobs big in order to have a bank account that just lets you travel 24/7. How wild, right? I'm sure you get this 1,000 times, and I've read a lot of your blog posts and have followed you, and so I know what you're going to say to me. But so what do you say to that when people are asking? Because there is going to be a lot of people listening in all demographics and ages and stages who are like, yeah, that sounds great, but I could never do that.
Totally. Absolutely. Anybody can do it if they make it their priority. That is the number one. It has to be your top choice above and beyond anything else. And so for me, it was. And so I didn't travel for 5 years straight. I actually traveled for 6 months of the year, every year for 5 years. I held a job with the city of Saskatoon. I drove tractors and equipment for them. I actually held that job for 9 seasons, almost a decade. Did it all through university and then all through my years of traveling. Because of that, I was able to accrue seniority, and I did get a pretty decent paycheck for it, which was quite nice. But I saved every single penny I could. And I'm a travel writer, but some days I wish I was a finance writer.
You probably could evolve into that, right?
I kind of am, actually.
Yes.
I am so passionate about money and budgeting and how to spend, where to spend, how to save, that it was because of my skills budgeting that I was able to make it happen. So like I tracked every single penny I spent on all of these trips. I could go, and I should actually go look this up one day so I have the numbers, but I could tell you how much I've spent on ice cream in every single country. It would be in different currencies, but I broke it down that specifically. I manually entered it. Now it's a lot easier. You can link it to your bank accounts. But when you're taking cash out of the ATM, I would manually track every penny that I spent to make sure I was living within the budget I had set out for myself. And to be like bluntly honest, I lived on a budget for 12 months of the year of $24,000.
Wow.
And saw the world for 6 months of the year. Yeah.
And I agree. Like, I think the word priority is definitely the key piece, because there's a lot of people that would just, the idea of having to track that would be like, no, I'm out.
Totally.
and that's fine.
Absolutely. And I also acknowledge a Canadian passport. It literally was my ticket. I think you have access to 172 countries that you don't need to purchase a visa to. Now, some of the countries I did go to, you do have to pay for that as well. But it is so much easier to travel as a Canadian as people from other nationalities too. So that was also something that was in my favor as well. So I do recognize kind of the privilege of some things like that.
That there could be some other challenges presented without that. So no, I totally agree. And I think that what I love about this story is that you hadn't already even taken a job as a teacher where you would be having that'll be a whole nother topic. People will say a decent salary. Teachers are well underpaid, in my opinion. With my kids going to school, they deserve way more than they get. But having a job with a consistent salary, I guess, is what I'm getting at, where you would be working in that and then choosing to go traveling. Like, you're working a regular job, working for the city, probably a job that people wouldn't maybe necessarily sign up for.
Totally. And I was $40,000 in debt with student loans, and I never missed one payment. And I paid off my students earlier than the average person pays it off.
So you'd already factored all of that, obviously, into it as well.
Couldn't book a ticket until I had all the money I needed to cover my student loans for the time I was traveling. That was like my first rule. Yeah.
Good for you. So how then, backing this up, how did you... do you feel like this is just a natural gift for you to have been able to be that disciplined and diligent and just understand your finances in that kind of way? Because I think that's a mystery to a lot of people.
Yep. I think it's just, it's something that naturally comes to me. Some people are great at not eating sweet treats. I will devour all the chocolate in front of me.
You're
anything
ice cream
sweet.
In every country.
Yes, I will eat all the food in front of me, even when I'm not hungry. But when it comes to money, I'm able to sit back and limit what I can and can't do with that money. And I'll portion it out in different bank accounts, right? So like every month I transfer that $2,000 a month to my checkings account. And then that's the money I have to work with that month. And it was, I would allow myself to fuel up once a month, and then I had to bike everywhere else. I bike to work every day,
I read that in your blog post, and I was like, that right there is the difference between succeeding at doing something like this and deciding that you're not willing to give up the comforts for that. Because filling up once a month would be a challenge.
Yeah.
And
it depends on everybody's role. Like that is what worked for me. Now somebody who has to commute a little bit further or can't bike for a variety of reasons, then you would maybe look at saving in other areas. But I think the biggest tip I give people is to really look at your budget when you're eating out and drinking out. The amount of money that you spend in restaurants or at coffee shops would probably blow most people's minds if they actually sat down.
That's right.
To calculate it. And then think of the amount of groceries you can buy for that same amount of money. So it was really difficult because Saskatoon is a social city.
Yes.
That's what people do. We go out to eat. And so it was really difficult to say, I was young at this age, and so all my friends were out drinking.
Absolutely.
And so it was hard to maybe not drink when I was at the bar, or like buy a couple beer beforehand or whatever it needed to be, or not go out to eat. So I would recommend to friends, like, maybe let's go have a picnic down by the water, or like get a coffee to have a picnic. And I still live by that now. Eating out, it's difficult to eat healthy. I do a lot of it on the road, and it's expensive. And to be honest, I just prefer to make my own meals for the most part too. Yeah.
That is so well, and I like that you were able to recognize that about yourself too, like the discipline in you aren't good at deciding whether you should eat the sweets or not, but this is a good thing. Like I think there's always something that you can focus on of whatever your skill and ability is, and it doesn't have to be the same as everybody else's, but being passionate about something isn't just about being passionate, it's about saying no to things so you can say yes to other things.
That's exactly it. And after I had traveled for a bit, I knew what $100 could get me in a country. That was another thing I did. So I didn't hop right over to Europe because I couldn't afford to travel in Europe.
Right.
So I picked other countries where it was more affordable for me to be traveling. And even I often show people a budget I did for 27 days in Vietnam. I spent $900.
Wow.
And that didn't limit me. Like I ate out for every meal because the street food in Vietnam is incredible. Like please eat out in Vietnam. But I did every activity that I wanted to. I didn't kite surf. That was the one thing, but there was too many kite surfers out there to be learning. So that was the one thing I said no to. That was kind of expensive. But otherwise, like, it can be so manageable with a small budget as long as you're like willing to make the effort to make it happen.
Totally. Well, we travel a lot as a family and have come up with similar strategies and tactics, which is what allows us to be able to go, and we do often live somewhere warm for a month in the winter or somewhere just to make the great escape. But it involves a lot of pre-planning for the rest of our life and make that happen. And we have people ask us all the time, how do you guys travel so much? You're always traveling. How does this work? And I'm like, well, we are very mindful of the things that we do, and we don't drive brand new vehicles, and we don't buy clothes very often, and like we wear the things we're like always good and always taken care of, and everyone's great, but I don't go to the mall very much because then I spend money,
rarely.
Right? And when I'm in a store, my brain literally now thinks, and after years of doing this, I'm like, oh man, that's like this much of a plane ticket. That's like that's how I love traveling so much that's how my brain equates to buying like a new shirt.
Yeah. Or if you are in the shopping mall, go to the clearance rack. Go to the sales rack first. Don't look at the front of the store. Go straight to the back. Find things on sale and on clearance. And I will wait. There's a sweater that I wanted, which was just recently actually. It was $180, which is insane. Like that is like, for me, I do not spend that kind of money.
How much street food I could eat in Vietnam for $180?
It's just so much money. And I really wanted it, and I thought about it for, it's been a couple months, and I saw it, and it was 30% off, which is still an insane amount of money for me to buy a sweater, but I chose to kind of save money for it, waited for it to be 30% off, and then I bought it, right? So you can make decisions around it. And actually, speaking of vehicles, I drove a car that was 21 years old up until like recently.
Sweet.
And I do all my own mechanical work on my, like you will see me in a parking lot somewhere. It's sometimes embarrassing, but I will be like climbed inside under the hood of my car to change the alternator on it, or like, so I go above and beyond, but I had to fix my current vehicle, and it was a $4,000 fix, and I did it for $1,000 because I did it on my own. It wasn't convenient, and it wasn't always easy, but I saved $3,000. So
and now you have more savings for your next adventure.
Right?
Yes, totally. I love that. So
yeah.
What would you say that in living the life of, from when you started and we're going away for like 6 months at a time and coming back and forth, and even just, I always have travel on my brain. I'm very present here, but I'm always thinking about where my next adventure is going to be, and by we, our family, and that type of thing. But how did you manage, I guess, the the lifestyle piece of it with keeping up with relationships, and how did you find how did you find that to work for yourself, and what did you do to make it the best that it could be for you?
So I actually, to be honest, I never missed home. It sounds like a weird thing to say, but I'm very extroverted too. And I found traveling solo made it so much easier to meet people on the road too. So I was often traveling with new and different people all the time. Sometimes I travel with somebody for a day, sometimes months at a time, depending on the situation. But maintaining relationships back at home, it took time and work and effort. And I'm thankful that the people in my life and have been friends with for a very long time, they're very understanding of what my life looks like. So they were either just patient knowing that we wouldn't chat every day and we would catch up when we can, but I have those friends where you can go months and just step back into your roles with them. And so that was very helpful. And it was one part I did struggle with was when I would come home from a trip and you just spent 6 months having some incredibly transformative experiences. And it is really difficult to describe that to people. And I found I would literally just come home and step back into my role that I was in before I left, like I had never left. And I didn't get the opportunity to talk about my experiences as much as I was hoping to, just because people, they're busy with their lives and it might not be as interesting, or they don't understand it, or they can't relate to it. They haven't been to those locations. And that was always really hard for me, was coming home and feeling like it's a bit of a travel depression when you get back home. You come off the high of traveling. And then like there was one year I flew back from the Philippines and I flew back at midnight and was at work at 7 a.m. after being 6 months away.
Totally.
And the time change. And so like I would just throw myself back into it. And it was wonderful how easily I slid back into life. But then it was really hard to kind of bring those two parts of my life together,
because you feel different coming back. You don't feel like the same, but everything else has been going on tickety boo here while you're gone.
Right? Yeah. And things have changed while you're here too, but it's still, you know what's going on here.
Right.
So that was always something, and still is something that I've struggled with in just like, I don't know.
Just finding that balance.
Yeah.
No, that's totally fair.
Yeah.
So
Valentine's Day is just around the corner, and if you are anything like me, you are on the lookout for creative ways to show your significant other, bestie, and special people in your life that you care. I've curated an adorable, delicious, and unique candy grazing box for your Valentine's this year. I'll do the heavy lifting and deliver a beautiful, delectable candy grazing box right to your door, or as a surprise to a friend's door on your behalf on Friday, February 14th, or any date you wish. Free delivery in Saskatoon and shipping available across Canada. There are only 50 boxes available, and you can find all of the details and order online at celebratingsimplelife.com. And just for listening to the podcast, and because I think you are so sweet, you get an exclusive code to receive 15% off your first Valentine's box with the code CELEBRATE15. That's an incredible savings to order today. Go to celebratingsimplelife.com and use the code CELEBRATE15 because today is a great day to celebrate.
did you find that like while traveling and stuff, were there situations that have come up in, I guess, since you've finished university till present, of the years of traveling you've had, that were challenging while traveling, circumstances and hardships that have come up that you maybe wouldn't have expected, or things that you just couldn't have predicted would have been the way that it was?
Traveling looks really glamorous, especially in the world of social media that glamorizes a lot of that. It can be really exhausting and it can be draining, especially when you're by yourself. You are on alert for everything at all times, depending where you're traveling. Everywhere is safe. Like, I would not ever tell anybody to not travel somewhere because of what they've heard in the media, because the second you step foot there, you realize how incredible the locals are in that area. But you're in a new area, new culture, new currency, new language, new food. It's overwhelming. It's very uncomfortable. And when you're by yourself, it can feel isolating a little bit too. And I always feel dumb when I'm traveling because you're like making mistakes, or I don't know how to ride transportation in this new city and I can't speak the language to learn. And where am I supposed to get off? So you like get on and you're like spinning around, looking at everything, trying to read your ticket. How do you even put your ticket in? Where do you put it in?
Like all the little things that you can never predict.
And people do it so casually every day, right? It's like even riding the bus in Saskatoon, knowing to pull the cable to get off. if somebody doesn't tell you that, you don't know. And so there's all of those kinds of moments happening when you're traveling, and it's a lot to take in. And so it's very exhausting, and plans never go to plan either. Mm-hmm. So it's helped me so much in my life now that it's not only do I have plans A, B, and C, I have plans X, Y, and Z, because I'm so used to thinking around situations. So it was just being on alert while I was on my own to make sure I was safe and taking care of myself.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. So what have you found about traveling that has been sort of the most rewarding experience for you? Or I guess something, or just a feeling that having the opportunity, I guess choosing this, won't call it an opportunity because you made the choice, conscious choice to do this, that has felt so good or liberating for you?
So for me, personally, looking at my own growth through travel, I think it would be like my independence and confidence. It can be super awkward to walk into a room full of people and not know anybody and have to make the best of it. And that's kind of what traveling is. Mm-hmm. You step into a new country and city and you don't know anyone and you're trying to make connections with people. Because I always say travel isn't about the places you see, but the people you see those places with. And so finding that human connection everywhere you go was just something that I found personally really amazing, to see how I could push myself outside my comfort levels to engage with people, especially if it was in a different language, and other travelers, and then building relationships with people while traveling too. It was very rewarding.
Yeah, I agree. And I can so relate to that, because that has been ultimately what I've based my entire career on, is human connection in different capacities within events and home and just entertaining and gathering and all of that. And again, traveling brings up that whole new way of seeing how other people connect and grow and learn and experience, and getting to know what you know from being brought up in Saskatchewan to across the world to what's happening in Cambodia, Vietnam is just such a growing experience. And I'm sure you've probably been able to incorporate a lot of the things that you've learned abroad to little things day to day here that you're like, oh wow, I remember them doing that there. This would be a cool way to kind of incorporate this and mesh our worlds together. Right?
And because there's always the world you grow up in, you kind of view as being right? And that doesn't mean it's the only way to do it. Like, it's great that it works that way, but it can work a different way. And sometimes that's uncomfortable too. I think the thing that travel is mostly is being uncomfortable, right? And figuring that out.
And making the best of uncomfortableness.
Yes. And then growing to that point where you can be comfortable. And so just seeing how different cultures act, react, celebrate, engage with each other has been really interesting, and it has helped make me more of an understanding person when I'm back at home here too. And more curious to say, hey, this is new and different for me. I'm not going to be uncomfortable by it. Instead, I'm going to be curious about it. And when you can engage with people who do things differently than you and show genuine curiosity, that's when you open up wonderful conversations to learn from each other.
Absolutely. And that to me is like where love and kindness and community are really fostered, not when you've all just been brought up the exact same way and have no reason to question each other.
Totally.
Right? Yeah. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So throughout this whole entire time then, you're traveling and you're back and forth between Saskatoon and everywhere and everywhere. How then did the role of your infamous Saskatchewan debut of becoming the Sask Wanderer come about? Because that is such a cool role that has not, it's still, I guess, a relatively new-ish program, so hasn't been, you're a rare commodity. Those of you that have been bestowed upon you the crown of Sask Wanderer. So how did that all come about as you're back and forth and all around the world?
Yeah. So there's actually a couple of really interesting stories with that whole process. But I had started blogging in late 2013. I've been a writer since I was a kid. Didn't realize it until I was an adult, but naturally just had that affinity for it. And because of all my travel, people were asking me about what to see, how to do it, how to save for it. And so I just started blogging for fun. And it was, in a way, a way for me to journal as well too. I did do some more personal journaling, but so I was blogging, doing the social media stuff, and this was like quite a few years ago now too. And I had actually been in South America and heard about the job opportunity and decided not to apply in 2014 because I wanted to go to Africa my next year. And then when my mom sent me the job application in I guess this was late 2014, it was 2013, before for the 2014 role. It was the right time at the right place. I was like, I didn't know what I was going to do after my Africa trip. It was the end of my 5th year. I still felt lost. My brand is the Lost Girls Guide because like even now I still feel lost with what I'm doing. And so I was actually traveling Madagascar at the time.
Cool.
And filmed a video to apply. And it's a really funny story, but so I was in Madagascar when I applied. I was in Swaziland when I interviewed. I actually had to rent a conference room in the best hotel I could find in the country because I needed internet, but I needed good enough internet because it was very important for me to Skype call in for an interview. A telephone call just wasn't enough. But then there was like a whole bunch of things that went wrong during this interview. I didn't get internet in time and they were already calling me, and then they called me but they didn't have audio, so then they were calling my Swaziland phone number and then Skyping on the screen, but I only had 30 minutes of airtime, so I had to be like, I'm sorry, I only have 30 minutes of airtime. I have a friend trying to get me more like airtime, but I couldn't. I tried to confirm beforehand how airtime worked in Swaziland, but they didn't even have Canada on the list of countries. And so it was like this whole crazy series of events that happened, and I just had to shrug it off and be like, this is what it's like traveling in Africa.
Right.
This is just what it's like.
It's meant to be.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
And so the interview went wonderful. Like I felt like I did a really good job, and I left that interview feeling like if I don't get it, that's okay. They were looking for something different. And then I was actually just coming off of a safari in Kruger National Park in South Africa when I got the email that they had given me the position.
Wow.
Yeah. So then I had to arrange for my flights back to Canada. And there's another funny story to this too. Like I didn't really know a lot about video editing. That was the one part that I just didn't feel like I had great skills in. So I literally flew back to Saskatoon on a Friday, needed to be in Regina for work on a Monday. And on that Saturday, I went to the library and I took out, those yellow books for like the dummies guide?
Totally.
I took out DSLR filmmaking for dummies and read it that Saturday.
Just a quick power up to get you to where you
Yeah.
needed to be for Monday.
Yeah.
I love that.
So a big learning curve for some things, but I read the manuals for all the microphones they handed me, and I watched videos, and I knew I was capable of doing it. I just needed the time and the opportunity to make some of those aspects of the job happen. So that's the behind the scenes story of landing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is so great. So how then did, I guess, committing to an opportunity like this, did you have to commit? Was this a 1-year thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was a contract from January until December. And for me, I walked into it knowing that that was my opportunity to launch myself from in terms of a future business that I could see myself having. So I was very intentional. In the years prior, it had been kind of a summer student program. 2014 was the first year it went full year, and then I was the second person to step into that full year position, but I was approaching it not from that summer student perspective. It was a full-on business, and I had very specific goals and targets that I was trying to hit that year, and then knowing what I wanted to do with it when I came out at the end of it. So networking was my number one. I don't think I slept that year, but it was worth it.
365 jam-packed days.
Yeah.
Wow. So what would you say would be from a business standpoint then, since you brought that up as to how you were looking at that for the year, what would you say would be a few of the main things that, because I think a lot of my listeners are either dreaming of owning a business, or again, this whole sort of glamorized, I think that along with traveling also happens in entrepreneurship, where you kind of glamour this flexible lifestyle and that you get to be your own boss and yada, 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 all of the things that comes along with it. And yes, there is a lot of really great things about it, but if you take your business the same way that you just take whatever job and career path you've chosen, it's what you put into it that you get out of it,
Completely.
right? So it doesn't matter if you're your own boss or you work for somebody, it's however you see
effort.
yourself. It's effort. It takes a lot of effort. And so what would you say would have been the things then as a budding entrepreneur at this point, right, where you're recognizing before the opportunities happened what you needed to do to make this year, make the most of the year, I guess? What would be a few things that came to mind, I guess, for yourself that would? I
think the biggest thing for me was building relationships and the networking. And it's also very intimidating because you walk into something and you know very little and you're talking to experts, and sometimes you know so little you don't even know what to ask and you come off as, you know, sounding very silly about things sometimes. But again, it's approaching it with that curiosity and genuineness too, right? So if you tell somebody, hey, I actually know very little about this, or I actually don't know what your business title means, can you explain it
That
to
is
me?
such a good point, right? Like it's not even, I think sometimes the phrase fake it till you make it kind of gets out there, and I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that, because I do agree there's certain times where you can have a confidence about yourself that can let people assume what they wish to assume about what your knowledge in a situation is. But I am the same as you. Like, that would always be my number one, is to just be real about it. And I'm not going to smile and nod and tell you that I know something that I 1000% do not
a
know,
clue.
because that is definitely going to come back to bite you.
Totally. And it can be so awkward too when somebody tells you what they do, and I don't even know what to ask after that, because I'm like, I don't actually understand what you do. And so for me, it was building those relationships. And because I worked with so many different ministries, I was thrown into so many different situations where I was like, I need to like either research this in advance or have a pre-conversation with somebody or let them know where I stand from my knowledge of this area. And then being genuine about it too, I think helped build and maintain those relationships. But then the most important thing was, after that year, I followed up on those relationships. I didn't just let them sit and wait for them to come to me. I have this wonderful partnership with CAA Saskatchewan. I've written for pretty much every issue of their magazine since. They've sent me on trips around the world. And it was because after that year, I reached out that year to ask to write for free for their magazine as the Sask Wanderer, to build that relationship. And then after that year ended, I reached out with pitches on travels that I was going on. Do you have interest? Can I help write something? Let me know. I would love to still be a part of this. And it's 5 years later, and I'm still publishing articles in their magazine. And it's incredible. It's been such a wonderful relationship to have.
Oh, I love that. I agree. I think the way you make somebody feel when you meet them is so much more than what the actual project is sometimes. And then if you are able to follow up on those things, and they weren't just seeing you as the Sask Wanderer, but recognizing that this is you as a person, and this is a temporary gig that you're in. That's amazing.
And I would stop in, if I was in Regina, I would pop into the office just to say hi to everybody. I would send Christmas gifts and cards and thank yous, or, you know, follow up with an email to say, you know what, I really appreciate what you've done for me. Because there are some people who, because of what they did for me the year as a Sask Wanderer, it was because of those actions that I was able to keep my business afloat that very first year. It wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for a few people doing the things that they did, right? And then following up a year or two later to say, I don't know if you knew this, but it was because of this that I was able to make a go of it to get to where I am today.
Right,
you know?
which I'm sure would make them feel so good too. Because you're right, like, you don't always realize. I think people, I mean, again, coming back to this whole Saskatchewan thing where we want to look out for each other and
Support one another.
support one another. There's that feeling there. But I don't think really we're always even aware from an individual or a business perspective as to the way that you're treating somebody or talking to somebody or going out of your way to do something that maybe doesn't even feel like that big of a deal, how much that can impact and pivot somebody else's trajectory. Case in point, you saying your first year was successful because of some little things that I'm sure didn't really take a lot of time and effort on their part, because it was just natural.
It was business for them, or it was just what they do. And
absolutely,
it meant the world to me, you know?
That's amazing. Yeah. I think that would definitely for myself be too the like number one thing that I would say has helped me succeed as a business owner, and just feeling like a genuinely decent person is just the way that you can talk and communicate to other people
and connect with those people.
Yes.
And then on the flip side of like actually running a business, I think it comes back to budgeting and finances as well. That has been a big thing. My first couple of years, I really barely made money. Like, it was, you know, I didn't know how I was going to buy my nephews Christmas gifts because I'm a penny pincher, but then these years it was like I was fine wiring it, and knowing how you're going to manage when you aren't getting paychecks coming in regularly, and to make sure you have that savings. So I've been really fortunate since that Sask Wanderer year. I saved enough that year to live a year in advance of myself. So right now, everything I earned in 2019, I'm living on in 2020, and every penny I earn in 2020, I'm going to live on next year. So it also forecasts what the next year is going to be like for me as well. but knowing how to manage your books, whether you hire an accountant or figure it out yourself. I did it all myself, called CRA, had meetings to learn what I needed to learn because I couldn't afford a bookkeeper or an accountant, right? But making sure that you have a plan to go forward with your business and you know what you're going to do in the tough days.
That's such great advice. You've heard it here, friends. Plan ahead. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
I love that. So obviously events and experiences, and we've been talking about that a lot in this conversation, that is something so dear to my heart as well, because that is the purpose of what I get to do for a living. And it's such a value to me personally. I love entertaining at home, and by no means do I mean anything wild, but just having just people in my home and going to other people's homes and connecting together. That is just something that I love. And so when you were traveling, or things, maybe experiences that you've brought back home, what would be some types of events or festivals or just get-togethers or traditions or things like that that you've maybe experienced, whether it just be from your upbringing and things that you've always known or learned along the years of growing up, or things that you've maybe experienced in other countries that you have found were special or meaningful moments that you could share a few stories about?
So I think this is actually a little bit of a flip side of the question is, events or moments that are really special. And for me, because I've missed a lot of the usual big moments, the births, the birthdays, the Christmases, the Easters, whatever it might be, I might not be there. So for me, it's in those quieter moments when I'm back at home and I get to hang out with my nephews, and it might not be Thanksgiving, but we're sitting on the couch playing or chatting, or I can take them out somewhere, and having just regular everyday moments with my family members. Even going out to help my mom put the garden in is something I now want to make into a yearly thing as a way to actively spend time with her, because it doesn't have to be at Christmas that you spend time with these people. You make those moments happen, and to be honest, they're usually a lot more fun when it's just putting the garden in.
The pressures of everything else.
The cooking and the the decorations of it all. So I've really come to appreciate the everyday moments with family and friends, and to not take that for granted, because when you are on the road, it's really tough when your friends are getting married and you're asked to be in the wedding and you have to say no because you can't afford the trip from wherever you're located at the moment to go back and forth.
Totally.
Yeah. And it's hard to say, I'm sorry, I can't afford to come support you in your wedding, right? And thankfully they were able to include me. They had a private ceremony just with the justice of the peace beforehand that I got to be involved with, but it still sucks missing those moments. So just making the effort when you are home to have fun and have fun with friends and do weird and different things. So I have girlfriends where, like, even today we went out and we had like a pizza party and we were skating, and that's what we do. And it was a perfect excuse to just have like a lunch break. It was also a work thing, but to like make it happen.
But
right?
exactly, but collaborating those things.
Yes.
I love that. I agree. I think there's so often there's sometimes a misconception that an event has to be something big, and I use the word event so loosely. Yeah, like it's just always an event, because to me those little moments are events too. I love it when my kids have wild ideas of what we should do on a Saturday night, of something that they think is super cool, and I want them to think outside the box. And sometimes it means just playing games at home and doing whatever, and that is just as amazing as anything. I love being home.
Truly, right?
Right? Yeah. Sometimes they have other kinds of wild ideas where I'm like, okay, that would have never crossed my mind to do before, but we're sure going to give it a dance.
And just being open to those experiences too, right? To say like, oh, this might not be my first choice or might not be how I want to do it, but like, why not? And
absolutely.
You'll probably remember it better than the things that you do 20 times over and over, right?
Yeah, because it'll stand out for sure. So besides the being at home, which I can 100% relate to, and I don't know if it's just like growing up and getting older and all of that too, but being an extrovert, I've definitely noticed in myself that has really flipped as I've gotten older. Like I still would naturally be an extrovert because I thrive and get energy from others. Other people. So the definition of it, but let me be home as often as I can, which I used to think that was almost like a curse word. Like, what? I have to be home by myself, Now I'm like, oh my word, if I can think of something more magical than being home, love being with my family, but sometimes even just home alone, walls and house to myself. I'm like, I could get like giddy just thinking about it inside of like being by myself. And I know for a lot of people that sounds like torture, and I would have been one of those people, but I think embracing the home and embracing, I don't know, I think for me, I feel like it makes me feel like I'm coming into my own.
Yeah, I honestly, people can't see me nodding and like
Yes,
laughing
I know,
along at this, but I'm like,
gesturing.
yes, emphatically nodding along because I am definitely an extrovert, 100%. But I also find the job that I have and social media has me on all the time. And it's not like I go on for work from 9 to 5 p.m. My work day might be 5 a.m. till 2 a.m. and you are on nonstop. And so for me, coming home and centering myself is so important. And I love travel, but man, I love coming home
Nothing
too.
like the cozy Blue Jays sweatshirt and my sweatpants and a glass of wine to really unwind.
And I pack like my coziest sweater and leggings with me now so I can take them everywhere because I'm like, no, when I'm somewhere else, I need to have that space to be comfortable because every day is so different and crazy and on the road and just like exhaustingly being on sometimes to know. Sometimes I'll come home and I won't leave my house for like 4 days.
Like, have I gone outside? Yeah.
Nope, I haven't. Yeah.
I love that.
And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Like, if it feels good for you, then it's good.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
So have you ever experienced, so I'll go back. I love your answer to that question because I think that was exactly how I was hoping you would spin that question. Have you experienced anything sort of out of the box or unique or different in festivals or events or things that you've seen somewhere else in the world that would be like, oh man, I have never seen something like that happen before? This is totally putting you on the spot. So you can, if you don't have something, we can add it in later.
So, and you know what, as extroverted as I am, I don't like big crowds and I'm more a person to be out in nature and to like being out in the forest just fills my soul, I guess. Off the top of my head, like there's been so many things.
You could like write a whole entire book.
I know, and then to think of
it.
So one thing that really kind of threw me off, food is always an interesting thing. I will eat pretty much anything. Brains is kind of where I call my limit. I don't need to eat brains of another animal. But in Cambodia, you would be taking the local bus and they would come on with trays, big, huge trays of food, but the food was very not what I was used to. So there would be coils of snake and cockroaches and bugs that were like 5-cent candies, and they would hand you a little baggie and they would scoop out however many bugs flavored with whatever spices into these baggies, and you would that was your snack.
There was your treat.
Yeah, and it was there's a whole lot there to kind of unpack because it's food, but it's food for like a really interesting reason because there was a genocide in Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge, and people were starving to death, and so they turned to eating, you know,
like
all
everything you could kind of get
anything
your hands
they
on.
could, yeah. And now it's just become a way of life, and you hear a lot about it now that you can get a lot of protein from bugs, and it was just very unusual and different for me. And then there was quite a bit of history on why that happened,
which
right?
makes so much more sense than just being like, bugs in a bag.
But then it still makes sense because it is something edible that you can eat and can sustain you too. But I remember like seeing these women with these trays, and I have photos of it, just being like, wow, this is so different from what I'm used to. One of those uncomfortable moments.
We could probably like create something pretty viral if we walked onto a city bus here in Saskatchewan with trays of grazing with I have grazing boards and candy grazing as a part of my business.
And you spin on charcuterie
And you spin on
boards.
charcuterie. Hey, do you think we're maybe onto something?
Yeah.
Stay tuned for that, you guys, in case you ever decide to get onto the Lucky City bus that we would be on.
New social media campaign
right?
for transit.
Stay tuned for that. I feel like that's an idea in the making.
Yeah. But yeah, it was just one of those moments where you're like, this is very different. And you just watch it all happen and take it in and experience it.
Totally. And then chat about it here on the podcast. And here we are, just like nodding our heads about it. Wow. I have had grasshoppers in my life.
Yeah. Crunchy. Yeah, and then
crunchy.
Usually flavored.
Yeah, usually flavored. Yeah. The sheep's bone marrow, sipping it out of the bone with a straw, was probably the most adventurous thing that I tasted living in China.
Very interesting. That's different.
It was like red liquid salt.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nothing good. But the platter was served, and I was with all of my colleagues, like the Chinese teachers that worked in our school, and they were taking us out for this really nice dinner. Yeah. And then the platter arrived. It was almost like I mean, this was many years ago, so my memory might not be serving me correct, but it was almost like it came at the end of the meal. Like it was almost like the finale of like the amuse-bouche finish. And they brought this platter with a whole bunch of straws on it.
And
like
did you know what to do?
Oh, no, I didn't. And I was like looking around. We were all at a big round table, and there was a few of us from Canada and South Africa and different parts of the world that were the English teachers living there. And we all just kind of looked at each other and like waited for, we were close enough with our Chinese teachers that we'd gotten to know enough that we were like waiting for them to take the lead. On. And they were like laughing at us, of course, because they knew that this, clearly by our reactions, that this was not a custom that we normally do at dinner in Saskatoon. And so, yeah, we just all inserted the straw into whichever piece of the bone was closest to us and sippity sip.
Had a little sip.
Yeah, a little sip. It was very minimal sip.
Yeah,
very
but you
minimal
have to
sip.
try it, right?
You have to try it.
And if you don't like it, that's okay too, but just give it a
it's apparently really good for you.
Yeah.
So there you go. You learned something.
Yeah.
So what would be, I feel like one of the questions that I know I'm going to get is just, I wanted to dig just a little bit into the idea of travel writing and more so even than that, content creation. I think that I'm sure you get those questions on a regular basis with the following that you have and just the amazing content that you put out, there and have been very intentional in gathering and curating this. That does not happen by accident or on a whim. It's very planned, and I think a lot of people think that it's like, oh, cool, she just snapped the photo and there it is. That's what people ask me too, and I'm like, yeah, no, this picture was from like 5 years ago. I'm currently sitting in my sweatpants when this got posted on social.
There's a very interesting reality behind it. So sometimes I am posting live, that does happen, but then sometimes like even I have some stories up today that was from 5 days ago when I was in the mountains, right? That's just the reality of it. Yeah. It takes so much time to create content and not just cull all the photos afterwards to pick the best ones. But so like even today I was on I have a client who I'm doing a social media campaign for, and so I needed to go out and do a photo shoot, and I had to do it with a couple girlfriends, and it is all of the details down from like what you're wearing, guessing what they're going to wear. Like I could reach out and be like, hey, can you wear this kind of stuff? Yes. But I had an extra sweater to make sure if I clashed with one of their colors, knowing what they were wearing outside, that I could have another color to put on, so we all pop in the photos. Little details, bringing blankets, setting them out, bringing twinkle lights, like those are really extra things to do. It's also, I do love twinkle lights, and I genuinely carry them everywhere with me. Like I will ski and hike into the back country carrying twinkle lights just to set out. That. But there is a lot of thought that goes into creating these images, and it gets easier over time, but there's always an effort being put into it. And sometimes the most important thing for me, though, is I'm an adventurer first and I'm a photographer second. So it's one thing to go out and do a photo shoot, but it's another thing to have an experience and a story to share with those photos. So I could get the most amazing photo from a photo shoot, but if there's no story, there's no context around it, right? Sometimes a beautiful photo can stand on its own for sure, but particularly with what I do, and I am my brand, I'm selling a story. So I need to have that adventure and then capture the photos as well. But it's, you really need to make a point of being present, because otherwise you're just going to be focused behind the lens.
Totally. And and I think you can feel that as a viewer looking, you can feel
completely
when you're looking at your Instagram, like the joy that you are having doing this. And you could be doing that and hate the outdoors. Yep. There's a lot of people that can post, you can be outdoors.
Yeah.
And I am not as big a lover of the outdoors, so that would not be those would not be the types of things. And when I do, it's usually LOL joke. Hey, look, who got outside? Who's out here in the snow? Here I am, and spinning that for my brand, because that's me, But like making it authentic to who you are, I think is, and I think sometimes when you don't know enough about yourself or haven't had enough experiences, even sometimes, no matter what stage of life you're in, it's hard to necessarily know what really is your thing and not. And you naturally can just see that exude out in somebody's content. And when you're not connecting with it, there's a reason probably why, or it's just not your jam, and that's fine too. But,
Yeah. And that's a really big challenge when I work with some clients too, is they have very specific brand messaging and they're like, be authentic, be genuine, but here's all of our messaging you need to put in there. And I'm like, there's no room for authenticity when I'm using your verbatim sentences that you've structured, because they will re-edit you afterwards and add in things to make it sound more like them. And so that's always the biggest challenge. And so I just think, how can I do something that is true and genuine to me? And yes, they are going to change it, but at the end of the day, I can stand there and say, no, like I really did actually carry McDonald's in on this trail to eat there. Like that is something I would do. Or like we really did have a pizza picnic, because that is something us three women, my girlfriends, would do, you know?
Yes.
So picking those things that they might seem a little bit crazy and quirky and you add to it, but we genuinely would be doing those things.
I love that. That's so true. So just authenticity really does. And if you don't know what authenticity is, then it's time to do a little more soul searching.
Yes. Yeah.
I love that. So I always like to finish up the interview with just asking a few sort of, I mean, we've dug deep into life and some stuff about you and business and that kind of thing, but just some like little nitty-gritty personal details about who Ashlyn really is. Yep. So you alluded to some of these things already, but what would be one thing, and I know you have, your days are very different sometimes and you don't have necessarily the same day every day, but what would be one thing that you do in the morning or to start your day off, whenever your day starts, that sets your tone for the day?
If I can wake up without an alarm clock, that is usually a really good day. And that doesn't mean I sleep in, but it just means I don't have that pressure to be up at a very specific time, and I can wake up naturally.
Your body can just know when it's time.
Yeah. And I'm also a night owl, so like I will work till 4 or 5 a.m. Like I worked till 5 a.m. last night. But then I was up at like 10 after 8, right? But I didn't use an alarm. I naturally woke up. So
yeah.
That's
a good one. I think that it would be nice if the world could work more like that.
Genuinely.
Yes. Are you a coffee drinker?
No.
So what would be something that I'm like, so how do you start your day? What could you possibly be doing? What do you like, drink tea? Do you have anything? Are you a smoothie? Like how do you start your day?
I don't know. I don't. Yeah, I don't.
Okay.
Caffeine makes me feel really weird. I do drink coffee on occasion. Sometimes I am like really needing it, but it's often like a half calf. I need to put half decaf because it just jitters me and makes me feel really uncomfortable.
It's good to know that about yourself.
Yeah, but I love the cream and sugar in coffee. Right. So again, the sweet things.
Right? And that's how you know you're not a real coffee drinker, right? If you like all the elements that go into it to cover up the base. Yeah.
Yep.
I love it. What is one thing, which I'm laughing when you were talking about your twinkle lights just now, what is something that you would always have in your purse or bag or whatever you're bringing around with you day to day that would be like always with you?
Something really basic like a ponytail or a lipsil. Mm-hmm. Those are two things I'm always searching for.
Doesn't it seem like they just disappear into the abyss of a bag, even if you're positive you put it in a certain
like
area?
Bobby pins.
Like what?
Gone, yeah.
It's like fairies.
Yeah.
And then they like drop it back in there.
I know.
When you aren't looking for it and that's all you can find.
I know, and then you have 8 of them in one location.
Like, what?
Yeah. So something really simple like that. Again, that's usually me getting comfortable sitting into work because I work in my vehicle a lot too, right? But something really quirky or special would be my twinkle lights. Genuinely do carry them with me everywhere because even it just makes me feel good. I can make a space feel like home. It's that light, that ambiance, that feeling.
Absolutely.
So,
creating your space.
Yes. Anywhere I am.
I love that. That is the first time I have ever heard that answer. Twinkle lights. Good answer. What is one thing that you do for yourself to self-care and take care of yourself to protect your mental health and to just keep you feeling like you?
So it's 2 things combined together. I run while I listen to audiobooks. So running is kind of my meditation. My phone's turned off. I don't have to answer anybody. It takes care of my health. I spend hours sitting and don't always eat healthy. And so it's really important for me to get out and move, and running is one way I do that. And then I love reading more than I love travel, but I don't get to do as much of it these days as I used to. So if I can combine something that's good for my health and have somebody tell me a story while I'm doing it.
Piggyback your earbuds in with a little audiobook. That's good.
Yeah, and they're free at the library.
Right. So. See? She brings it back to the budgeting, you guys. I love it. So finally, what would be you've given so many amazing pieces of wisdom today and insight into the unique pieces of your life, but what would be one sort of final thought that you would leave for listeners today as they move forward on their day and think about ways that they want to bring sort of more of the passion and things that they love into their own lives?
So I think from the perspective of if people are looking to kind of push themselves out of the comfort zone or want to learn something new or start a business or keep pushing forward in their business, something I always think about is things are easier when you can do it together with somebody else. So reaching out to people. If you need help with somebody, with something, saying, hey, I see you're really good at this. I have a couple questions. Do you have some time I could buy you a coffee and chat about it with you? And then you're building a relationship, a network, a friendship. You're building support and community. And so whether it's personal or professional, just seeking ways to build community around what you're doing to help you reach your goals, I think is really important, because I've struggled through a lot of what I've done on my own, and it can feel very isolating. And when I'm able to go out and do it with other people, you usually end up with a better product, and you have relationships based around it as well.
I love that. That is so great. Well, thank you so much for being here today. This has been absolutely lovely chatting with you. We could probably do 8 more episodes just spinning off onto all of the things we talked about today. So I will tag your Instagram and blog and website into the show notes so that you guys can all follow along. And she's got some really cool adventures, you guys. So tune into there. Thanks you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
This show would not be possible without you, my incredible listeners. It would mean the world to me if you would subscribe to Celebrating Simple Life on Apple Podcasts, or download and listen on Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you choose to listen. If you really want to make my day, leave a review. These reviews, ratings, and sharing screenshots of podcast episodes that were engaging for you on your Instagram stories, and tagging friends that you think should hear the episode too, really helps the podcast grow. It makes me so happy that I often select reviews to read on the show, and if yours is chosen, you will receive a special gift from me. Thank you for being a part of my mission to connect stories of business and life. Cheers to Celebrating Simple Life.